All right, we are back. Welcome to another episode of The Liz Wheeler Show. I'm your host, Liz Wheeler. Before we get into the meat of today's show, would you do me a favor and subscribe to the show? Would you pick up your phone, click on that Spotify app, and search The Liz Wheeler Show? You'll recognize it because you know my face. Hit subscribe and leave us a 5-star review if you would be so kind. I greatly appreciate everybody who's been doing that. But I know some of you still need to subscribe on Spotify. So if you would, I'd be so appreciative. I always say we now have video on Spotify, and it is a censorship-free app. Sometimes on YouTube, sometimes on Facebook. We still have to tiptoe around their terms of service because the big tech companies are a little more lenient under a Trump administration, but I just don't trust them entirely. Spotify, however, has been censorship-free, so you can always find the full breadth of our content on Spotify. Make sure you subscribe. Okay. What I want to talk to you about today is a poll that shocked me. I was legitimately shocked when I read the numbers in this poll. It is from the Media Research Center, and the title of this poll is the same as the title of the show, so you have a little clue into what we're going to talk about today. This is what the headline says. Only 24% of likely voters know Charlie Kirk's killer was left-wing. I read this, and I actually clicked on the article primarily because I did not believe it at first. This is what the article says. It turns out it's true. It's just astonishing that this is true. The article says ABC late-night comedian Jimmy Kimmel wasn't suspended for very long for preposterously claiming that Charlie Kirk's alleged murderer, Tyler Robinson, was a right-wing mega type. In the wake of Kirk's killing, the media aggressively played dumb, claiming the motive was, quote, elusive and, quote, complicated. Now, we're seeing the effects of the misleading coverage. According to a November 25th McLaughlin and Associates national poll of 1,000 likely voters conducted for the Media Research Center, less than a quarter of respondents correctly described Tyler Robinson, the man accused of murdering TPUSA founder Charlie Kirk, as left-wing. This is the poll. The poll asked participants the following question, and I quote, "On September 10th, 2025, Turning Point USA founder Charlie Kirk was murdered while speaking on a college campus. What was the political ideology of his killer?" Options for answers included left-wing, moderate, right-wing, no ideology, other, and don't know. The plurality of respondents, 27.5%, professed no knowledge of Robinson's political ideology. Less than a quarter, 24.1%, identified him as left-wing, while 22.3% incorrectly asserted that he was right-wing. Another 13.2% claimed he was either moderate or a centrist. 24%. That's it. That's it. And it gets even worse, actually, if you break it down by the party affiliation of the likely voters. Only 18.8% of those who primarily watched left-of-center cable news outlets were able to correctly describe his ideology, as compared to 27.7% who asserted that he was right-wing. Surprisingly, MRC writes, even among right-of-center cable news viewers, barely over a third of participants, 33.5%, answered that Robinson was left-wing, and a still considerable 18% believed him to be right-wing. The professed political ideology of respondents also heavily affected their perception of Robinson's own political proclivities. A whopping 35.4% of liberals believed he was right-wing, while just 12.7% identified him as left-wing. This might be the most shocking of all. For conservatives, 17% answered that he was right-wing, whereas over 41.9% described him as left-wing. I'm not going to lie to you right now. I was shocked when I read this, and I had to take some time to process why. Why is this? Why is this? We know so much about every terrorist, every mass shooter, every assassin, every school shooter almost immediately after they commit their grisly crime. How is it that only 24% of voters know that Charlie Kirk's killer was left-wing? This is the most horrendous, grisly political assassination in our lifetime, if not in our nation's history. And 3/4 of people don't know the truth about it. So why is this? Well, the reason why is because the loudest voices, and this is true on both sides of the aisle, this is not exclusive just to the left, the loudest voices on both sides of the aisle had, from the beginning, from the moment that this happened, from the day that Charlie Kirk was murdered, they had in their minds preconceived villains. Of course, this is not how to conduct an investigation. You don't start an investigation with a preconceived villain and then try to fill in facts in order to substantiate your preconceived villain. An honest and objective investigation looks at the facts, puts together what the facts say, and lets that inform the result. But the loudest voices from the mainstream media, who immediately noted that Tyler Robinson, Charlie Kirk's accused killer, came from a family, his parents were registered Republicans, which is true. They assumed without any journalistic diligence, because this is what they wanted to believe was true, that Tyler Robinson was a Trump supporter. In fact, mainstream media outlets initially tried to associate Tyler Robinson with being a groyper. Why? Because those are the people, groypers, Trump supporters, that the mainstream media most wants to vilify. They weren't interested in the truth. They were simply interested in trying to vilify and falsely associate Tyler Robinson with you, because they wanted to portray your beliefs as being dangerous and deadly. Wasn't just the mainstream media. Hollywood did the same thing. Jimmy Kimmel, you remember Jimmy Kimmel. The Jimmy Kimmel saga was one of the biggest destructive distractions from the truth about what happened to Charlie Kirk that we've experienced yet in our country. I mean, it might have seemed stupid, Jimmy Kimmel portraying himself as a victim. This is the false accusation that he made about Tyler Robinson really was less of a false accusation about Tyler Robinson and more of a false accusation of you, if you're a Trump supporter, trying to associate you with Tyler Robinson. This is what he said.
We hit some new lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them and doing everything they can to score political points from it. In between the finger pointing, there was grieving. On Friday, the White House flew the flags at half staff, which got some criticism. But on a human level, you can see how hard the president is taking this.
My condolences on the loss of your friend Charlie Kirk. May I ask, sir, personally, how are you holding up over the last day and a half, sir?
I think very good. And by the way, right there, you see all the trucks? They just started construction of the new ballroom for the White House, which is something they've been trying to get, as you know, for about 150 years. And it's going to be a beauty.
Yes.
As he should have been, falsely accusing Tyler Robinson as being a Trump supporter in order to vilify you, to vilify me, to vilify the majority of people in our country who voted for Donald Trump in the last election. But what happened when Jimmy Kimmel was pulled off air is this made Jimmy Kimmel the perfect victim. I've been a victim. My speech is being punished. I'm being censored. Government, Donald Trump, the dictator, is weaponizing government against me to silence me because I dared to criticize him. This was victim Jimmy Kimmel. And I saw it. I saw it in my own personal life. I saw it on the social media accounts. You know, people who I'm friends with on social media who aren't in the political sphere. It's not on my public social media profiles. I saw the ones who are leftists start posting angry, outraged, indignant over what was happening to Jimmy Kimmel, but no posts from them about what had happened to Charlie Kirk. It gave the left this perfect outlet for what should have been their grief, regardless of whether they agreed with Charlie Kirk or not. They should have felt grief at seeing a man, a husband, a father, a Christian, an American citizen engaging in civil dialogue on a college campus, cut down, assassinated, shot in the neck. And yet they aimed their outrage. They were outraged on behalf of Jimmy Kimmel. Outraged on behalf of Jimmy Kimmel. And it wasn't just the mainstream media, and it wasn't just Hollywood. We had leftists online, powerful voices in the leftist commentariat, whether it was op-eds or opinions on X. We had leftists instantly defending the transgender ideology, because of course Tyler Robinson wasn't just roommates with Lance Twiggs. Tyler Robinson was engaged in a sexual relationship with Lance Twiggs. Lance Twiggs, of course, is a biological male who was quote unquote transitioning to female. But leftists, of course, instantly jumped to the defense of the trans individual. They said, oh, well, it's Tyler Robinson. He's the one who pulled the trigger, and he comes from a Republican family in Utah. But Lance Twiggs, the transgender, he's the one who's immediately cooperating with law enforcement. And it was no mistake. It was no error. It was no accident that they portrayed Tyler Robinson and Lance Twiggs in that way. The left was immediately defending the transgender ideology because they wanted to get ahead. They wanted to get ahead of you, frankly. They wanted to get ahead of people's understanding that the transgender ideology is inherently violent, that the transgender ideology is not just destructive to the minds and bodies and souls of the individuals who reject objective truth and pretend to be the opposite sex and mutilate their bodies accordingly. It's not just an assault on our society, which is built on natural law. It's also a dangerous neo-Marxist ideology that essentially targets these vulnerable, mentally ill youth and turns them into hardened Marxist revolutionaries who feel that their only course of action against the genocide that's being attempted against them by Christians and white men and Republicans is, of course, to commit violence against those very people. The left doesn't want to talk about that, and so they immediately, preemptively, began to praise Lance Twiggs for his cooperation with law enforcement. And it wasn't just the mainstream media and Hollywood and the left that came to their defense. The loudest voices on the right, in right-wing media and independent media, also came to the table with preconceived villains and structured their so-called investigations accordingly. Candace Owens, we've talked about Candace Owens' allegations and her preconceived villain, her preconceived bias against Israel on this show before. She came to the table with a preconceived villain in mind. She wanted Israel to be the bad guy, and she looked for any kind of substantiating detail that could make it appear as though her preconceived villain was actually guilty. When, in fact, her dismissal of Tyler Robinson as Charlie Kirk's assassin was based, as she admitted herself in a CNN clip, was based on a complete misunderstanding at best, at worst, just a total lack of knowledge of the facts of the case. Take a look.
When you say you believe that Charlie Kirk was betrayed by someone close to him, what do you mean?
I think that in the coming weeks, there's going to be a lot of financial reports that are coming out. And I, first and foremost, do not believe that Tyler Robinson killed Charlie Kirk. I want to be very clear on that. Whether he was involved, I think the answer is yes. I think that's obvious. And
your basis for saying he didn't act alone is what?
I don't know, maybe the weird Fed messages that were concocted out of thin air that had no timestamp and were written like they were speaking in 1822, among other things. Their lack of an ability to answer any basic questions about what took place.
But do you have any proof that the messages were made up? Because that would be easily proven.
Yeah, but they didn't put timestamps on them, and Discord came out and said they didn't exist.
This was supposedly text messages, not Discord messages. It's my understanding from the indictment.
I actually did not read that they were text messages.
The indictment calls them text messages.
What would it be like the feds are like on a computer, typing it out back and forth?
That's exactly what it is. The feds made up the text messages.
But you don't have anyone from like the FBI telling you that, or law enforcement?
Leaks.
Okay.
No.
Has anyone leaked to you?
And Tyler Robinson
But has anyone said to you, even off the record, yeah, we faked these?
I have very strong sources everywhere on both sides.
Well, I look forward to seeing the evidence of that.
Yeah, sure. Because when we keep talking about evidence, it's like, who's going to present that evidence? Like the mainstream media? Like who are you expecting to come out?
Yes, that would be a hot story.
No, it wouldn't be.
It would be.
It wouldn't be.
If the FBI, if I had a source telling me, if I had proof that the FBI faked those messages, that would be an enormous story.
Yeah, I kind of feel like we live in a post-Epstein world, and we know how stories get shut down.
So you have the mainstream media, you have Hollywood, you have the leftist commentariat, and you have right-wing individuals like Candace Owens who came to the table with a preconceived villain, a preconceived bias. And the problem with this, of course, is not just the dishonesty of the thing in and of itself. The problem with this, the reason that you should feel angry when you read the title of that poll that says only 24% of voters in our country know that Charlie Kirk's killer was left-wing. If we are friends of Charlie Kirk's, and we are, then we seek justice for the crime that was committed against him. And justice is not being served because the real threat in our country, the conspiracy that underlies the assassination of Charlie Kirk, is the rise of left-wing violence in our country that is not only sanctioned by left-wing commentators and Democrat politicians, but is promoted by a vast network of left-wing groups, particularly left-wing groups that are associated with the transgender ideology and with Antifa. And when you bring to the table a preconceived villain without any evidence of this villain's guilt, except for your own malice towards, whether it's Jimmy Kimmel's malice towards you because you're a Trump supporter, whether it's Candace Owens' malice towards Israel because who knows why, it causes the actual threat in our country, the actual conspiracy, and justice for Charlie Kirk to be thrown to the wayside. These voices continue, who have engaged in confirmation bias, continue to do so to this day. And so what I want to do today, sitting here with you, is I want to change that statistic. By the end of this episode, and I want you, this is true not just for your friends on the left, not just for your friends who are independent, not just for centrists, not just for your apolitical family members who might have posted about Jimmy Kimmel, even though they have demonstrated no other obvious interest in politics. This goes to your most right-wing friends, your most heated group chats. This goes out on X. This goes to everyone who you have ever discussed politics with. I'm going to change that 24% number. And I'm going to show you today 5 things about Tyler Robinson that 3/4 of people in our country don't know. I want to give a sincere thank you to the sponsors of the Liz Wheeler Show who stand by us no matter how controversial the topics are that we discuss, who are in it for the right reasons. We are happy and proud to support you, and I want to thank Kindred Harvest for being today's sponsor. Listen, we talk about politics during the day. We need to relax in the evening. Maybe you do so like I do with a cup of tea, but here's the thing. You need to know what's in your tea. The Chinese tea industry has flooded America with products absolutely contaminated by microplastics and heavy metals. They do not care about your health. They care about your wallet. Kindred Harvest is your answer, your solution to this problem. Third-party, lab-tested, zero microplastics, zero heavy metals, blended and packed right here in the United States. Whether you need morning energy tea or evening herbal, it is clean tea for your entire family. My favorite is the immunity tea. My husband likes the green tea and the sleepy time tea. Stop trusting China with your family's health. Choose American quality. Choose Kindred Harvest. Go to kindredharvest.co and use my code Liz for 20% off. That's kindredharvest.co. Use my code Liz for 20% off. We will change that 24% number. We will. Because the truth is on our side, and we have evidence of that. The first thing that I want to show you are these text messages. It's the same text message, actually, that Candace Owens dismissed because she said they were fed messages for 2 reasons. She said Discord claimed that they didn't exist, and she thought they sounded like they were written by people from 1822, not the way that young 20-year-old bros talk to each other in this day and age. Well, her first problem with the text messages that Discord says they don't exist is because they were never sent on Discord. They were text messages, and it said so pretty clearly in the indictment, which Candace Owens said she had never even read. So her first reason for dismissing these text messages as inauthentic is, as I said before, at best, a misunderstanding of the facts, at worst, complete ignorance of the facts of the case in front of her. Her second reason for dismissing these cases as being invented by the feds is because the language of these texts is super weird. On that, she and I agree. You probably do too. We've talked about this on the show before. You've probably read these text messages. If you haven't, get ready to hear some weirdo talk. Now, I will preface this by saying there's a couple of reasons why these text messages could be weird. And I think it's important that we analyze why they could be weird. Why do they sound like they're written by weirdos? Well, option number one is they could have been invented by the feds. This could be completely fabricated. That's possible. We don't have any evidence of that, though. So that's just wild speculation. The second option is it could have been prefabricated by Tyler Robinson and Lance Twiggs. It could be something that they pre-wrote in order to make it seem like Lance Twiggs had no prior knowledge of this crime. Again, we don't have any evidence of that. That's certainly a theory. If I were the FBI, I'd probably look into that one. And then the third option is that they are weird text messages that give us a really weird vibe because they were written by very weird people. That seems to me to be the most likely scenario, not based on how I feel, but based on the facts of the matter. Let me read you these text messages. On the day that Charlie Kirk was murdered, Tyler Robinson texted Lance Twiggs. The mainstream media portrays Lance Twiggs as Tyler Robinson's roommate, which I suppose is technically true in the same sort of sense that my husband is my roommate. No, they were lovers. They were engaged in a sexual or romantic relationship. Lance Twiggs was in the process of quote unquote transitioning from male to female, was taking black market HRT. Robinson texted Lance Twiggs and said, quote, "Drop what you're doing. Look under my keyboard." The note under the keyboard that Lance Twiggs retrieved read, of course, written by Tyler Robinson, "I had the opportunity to take out Charlie Kirk, and I'm going to take it." The text message exchange continued. Lance Twiggs said, "What?" with about a dozen question marks. "You're joking, right?" Robinson responded by saying, "I am still okay, my love, but I'm stuck in Orem for a little while longer yet. Shouldn't be long until I can come home, but I got to grab my rifle still, to be honest. I had hoped to keep this secret till I died of old age. I am sorry to involve you." Twiggs said, "You weren't the one who did it, right?" Robinson said, "I am. I'm sorry." Twiggs said, "I thought they caught the person." Robinson said, "No, they grabbed some crazy old dude, then interrogated someone in similar clothing. I had planned to grab my rifle from my drop point shortly after, but most of that side of town got locked down. It's quiet, almost enough to get out, but there's one vehicle lingering." Twiggs said, "Why?" Robinson replied and said, "Why did I do it?" Twiggs said, "Yeah." Robinson said, "I had enough of his hatred. Some hate can't be negotiated out." He's speaking, of course, about Charlie Kirk. Robinson continues, "If I am able to grab my rifle unseen, I will have left no evidence. Going to attempt to retrieve it again. Hopefully they have moved on. I haven't seen anything about them finding it." Twiggs asks, "How long have you been planning this?" Robinson says, "A bit over a week, I believe. I can get close to it." Talking about his rifle again. "But there's a squad car parked right by it. I think they already swept that spot, but I don't want to chance it. I'm wishing I had circled back and grabbed it as soon as I got to my vehicle. I'm worried what my old man would do if I didn't bring back Grandpa's rifle. I don't know if it had a serial number, but it wouldn't trace to me. I worry about prints. I had to leave it in a bush where I changed outfits. Didn't have the ability or time to bring it with. I might have to abandon it and hope they don't find prints. How the F will I explain losing it to my old man? Only thing I left was the rifle wrapped in a towel. Remember how I was engraving bullets?" Tyler Robinson writes. "The effing messages are mostly a big meme. If I see, quote, notices bulge UWU on Fox News, I might have a stroke. All right, I'm going to have to leave it. That really effing sucks." Robinson then says, "Judging from today, I'd say Grandpa's gun does just fine. IDK, I think that was a $2,000 scope." Robinson then directs Lance Twiggs delete this exchange. Robinson said, "My dad wants photos of the rifle. He says Grandpa wants to know who has what. The feds released a photo of the rifle, and it is very unique. He's calling me right now, not answering." Robinson said, "Since Trump got into office, my dad has been pretty diehard MAGA." Then Robinson says, "I'm going to turn myself in willingly. One of my neighbors here is a deputy for the sheriff. You are all I worry about, love," he says to Lance Twiggs. Twiggs finally responds and says, "I'm much more worried about you." Robinson then says, "Don't talk to the media, please. Don't take any interviews or make any comments. If any police ask you questions, ask for a lawyer and stay silent." I think we can both agree that those are very weird text messages. The phraseology, the obsession with the rifle, the way that Tyler Robinson refers to Lance Twiggs as my love, that's very odd. It's very weird. It raises your red flags. It raises my red flags, and as it should. But what does the evidence show us? Does the evidence point towards feds, as Candace Owens suggested, sitting there typing out these messages, inventing them, falsely accusing Tyler Robinson of this crime? Well, we have no evidence of that, and nor does Candace. Do we have evidence that Tyler Robinson and Lance Twiggs prefabricated these messages before the crime was committed? I don't have any evidence. I have said this before, and I will repeat. I think if I were the FBI, I would certainly pursue that question as part of my investigation, given what we'll talk about regarding Lance Twiggs and his background in a moment. But we don't, as of yet, have evidence of that. But we do have evidence that these two young men, Tyler Robinson and Lance Twiggs, were deeply disturbed individuals, that they were weirdos, to put it bluntly, and weirdos often speak like weirdos. If you're a weirdo, you're probably not speaking like a normie. Otherwise, people wouldn't identify you as a weirdo. When you're a weirdo, it shows up in your demeanor, in your affect, in your speech, in your writing, in your text messages. That's how people get the vibe that you're weird. Tyler Robinson's family members, including his own mother, also said that Tyler Robinson had become increasingly left-wing. Now, of course, in those text messages, Tyler Robinson identifies this himself when he falsely accuses Charlie Kirk of being hateful. He said, "I've had enough of this hate. Can't negotiate this hate out." Well, what hate is he talking about? He's, of course, talking about Charlie Kirk's views on the transgender ideology. Charlie Kirk's views on the transgender ideology is that a man is born a man and cannot be a woman, and a woman is born a woman and cannot be a man. Charlie Kirk believed in basic biology, and he believed in speaking the truth in love, but plainly, to those even suffering under a transgender delusion. Tyler Robinson admitted he believed that was hate, which is a left-wing viewpoint. He is articulating a left-wing ideology, which was confirmed by his mother. Tyler Robinson's mother, according to the BBC, explained that over the last year or so, Robinson had become more political and had started to lean more to the left, becoming more pro-gay and trans rights-oriented. She stated that Robinson began to date his roommate, a biological male who was transitioning genders. This resulted in several discussions with family members, but especially between Robinson and his father, who have very different political views. In one conversation before the shooting, Robinson mentioned that Charlie Kirk would be holding an event at UVU, which Robinson said was a stupid venue for the event, and Robinson accused Kirk of spreading hate. So we have Robinson, in his own words, in those text messages, articulating a left-wing ideology, calling Charlie Kirk's views on transgenderism hateful. We have his own mother saying that he became increasingly left-wing, especially on trans and gay issues. We have Robinson accusing Charlie Kirk of spreading hate, specifically as it relates to the UVU event, and saying that Robinson and his father being a registered Republican, have very different political views. It is now becoming clearer by the day that Tyler Robinson was not only not a Trump supporter, he was not MAGA, like Jimmy Kimmel said. He was embracing the radical leftist ideology, particularly as it relates to the transgender ideology. Before the shooting, he had other family members that described Robinson as, quote, full of hate. That, of course, is political friends. Then we have an informant, a former friend of Tyler Robinson and Lance Twiggs, another young man who frequented their apartment. In fact, he spent a lot of time at the apartment of Tyler Robinson and Lance Twiggs. He played magic cards with them and other friends who gathered at that apartment. He seemed particularly close to Tyler Robinson's trans lover, Lance Twiggs. He said he would spend hours talking to Lance Twiggs. And this informant, who did not want to be identified by name, revealed insider information about Lance Twiggs, Tyler Robinson, Lance Twiggs' mental state, the state of their apartment, the sexual and emotional relationship between Lance Twiggs and Tyler Robinson, in addition to the drug use that seemed very prevalent in that apartment, at least Lance Twiggs' drug use, if not Tyler Robinson's. And this informant spoke to an internet personality, a YouTuber named Turkey Tom. Now, the reason that I find this to be particularly interesting is because Turkey Tom is not in the conservative commentariat. He's not a right-wing political commentator. He's a YouTuber. He's kind of in the bowels of the chronically online niche on YouTube and comments on controversies that are kind of online controversies. So the fact that this informant came to Turkey Tom instead of to a mainstream media outlet, instead of even to law enforcement, I suppose we don't know if the informant has talked to law enforcement or not, but came to Turkey Tom, and that Turkey Tom did pretty admirable due diligence, verifying that this person was authentic, requiring photos that verified the connection between the informant and Tyler Robinson and Lance Twiggs, including photographs of Tyler and Lance's apartment, as well as drawings allegedly made by Lance, and then screenshots and evidence of Discord archives, 3 different servers that both Lance and Tyler were in. He documented the association between this informant and Tyler Robinson and Lance Twiggs in a fairly solid manner, especially for someone who does not have a journalistic apparatus behind him. Can we 100% verify the authenticity of this? Well, of course not, unless we were also to know the identity of the person. However, given how this informant corroborated his information to Turkey Tom, it seems to be as verifiable as possible. This is what the informant provided to Turkey Tom. A series of text messages detailing what Lance Twiggs' mental state was, his relationship with Tyler Robinson, and I want to read you some of these text messages. We're going to show these on the screen as well, because these are some photos from inside Lance Twiggs and Tyler Robinson's apartment. This is what the informant said. The apartment would drastically shift from clean to super dirty, depending on the state of Lance's mood. I don't have too many pictures of most of the mess, but basically he'd start living in the living room and just start turning it into his nest. There are some redactions in these text messages to provide privacy for others whom the informant is talking about and to protect the privacy, or the anonymity, I should say, of the informant himself. But he talks about when Tyler Robinson moved in with Lance Twiggs. Lance had a really big breakdown after Tyler moved in. The living room went from a place that could have guests over to something that felt, and there is a redacted blackout, they had friends over, but everyone would get weirded out by all the trash. He basically had like layers of wires, random Temu trinkets, decorations, random art projects, clothes, and empty alcohol containers everywhere. And if anyone touched it, he'd get livid. Somebody whose name is redacted was banned from the apartment for a while because he kept touching the trinkets. I wish I still had pictures, but I felt sort of guilty, the informant said, and deleted them since I knew Lance wasn't in the right state of mind. For context, he said, I've been playing games with Lance and Tyler for like 6 years. I count myself kind of close to them because I was trying to separate them from myself because being around them wasn't good for me. I say them, but Tyler was always really level-headed and easygoing, but Lance could be anywhere from too depressed to talk to manic, wide-eyes, crazy person. During his first nest phase, Lance started working very rarely, but when Lance was super depressed or just too manic, he'd take the day off work and hit his THC vape drink and scroll reels. So Lance Twiggs was a drug user. The informant goes on to describe the state of the apartment and how Tyler was kind of your normal blue-collar Utah guy. Most conversations with him, he'd talk hunting, camping, gaming, and he loved talking about fishing. The informant says, so I felt super bad when he first moved, redacted name, normal for like 2 weeks, and then Lance went nuts, and the entire downstairs just became his nest. Lance, would be doing experiments in the kitchen, which were mostly just growing mold in Tupperware mugs in the kettle with random Temu trinkets and rocks submerged in them. But every once in a while, I'd try and have a talk with Lance and try to get him to realize he needed help without making him go ballistic. I'm not going to say it was all just him being insane. His mom is like super Mormon and also kind of crazy, so there's that, and all the drugs like weed, LSD, shrooms, DMT, and I think he said Molly, but I'm not sure. Also, alcoholic levels of alcohol. Lance has always been a little weird and quirky, but never really crazy. He was constantly arguing with his mom every time he saw or her, and then ranting about Republicans and Mormons when he got home. I'd sometimes talk with him for like 4 hours of just him ranting about his mom and his family. He really hates Mormons. Also, at the time, politically, Lance and I would both probably describe ourselves as libertarian, and Tyler was very apolitical. He had his nest phase, Lance, for probably 3 to 4 months before he sort of went back to normal. But at the tail end, we both talked for a while. He told me he was trans and that it wouldn't change anything, that I could even use whatever pronouns and he wouldn't care. Over like the next week and a half, the living room got dismantled. He vacuumed and cleaned the kitchen a bit. He still kept one mold experiment outside, though, just for some reason. But it was kind of relieving not to see so much trash around. He said, the informant goes, we'd have a mostly weekly magic night at the apartment where everyone would come drink, get high, and play magic. Lance started attending again after he became mostly normal. However, in between all of his turns, he'd go hang out with Tyler, and we'd have to call him to the tables every time it was his turn. One of my gym buddies was the first to pick up on Tyler and Lance being really close. I was in denial for months, the informant says, because I thought Tyler was straight, and I also kind of didn't want it to be true. Eventually, I kind of snapped out of it, though, because I saw them asleep cuddling on the couch. I kind of didn't think too much of it, since Lance would get super cuddly every time he got drunk, which is how I think they got together, because I'm pretty sure Tyler was a virgin, the informant says, when he moved in. So probably when Lance was in a cuddly mood, probably something happened, but that's just my guess. Which is an interesting observation, that there was an aspect of sexual grooming that played into this relationship between Lance Twiggs and Tyler Robinson. Lance Twiggs, of course, being a leftist from the beginning. Then the informant said, I started noticing changes in Lance's political views as the presidential election got closer. He amped up the complaints of old people staring at him, which was probably because he dressed like a stone and not because he was female presenting, because all he did in that department was grow out his hair and wear mascara every once in a while. He also hated that the construction workers would misgender him, which I thought was weird since he said he was fine with any pronouns. Tyler wouldn't really get political until after the election. He'd sometimes just casually bring up the latest thing Trump had done and complain about what it'd do to the country, but in a very level-headed way. Before the election, Lance's friend group was the quirky LGBT group with a lot of mental illnesses. Not saying the two are linked, but that's how my friends knew them. They're the people who were in Lance's server for the most part. After the election, they became a lot more political, but not to an extremist level. By this point, I could safely say Lance and Tyler were some flavor of left-wing, while I'd kind of become tired of politics and mostly apolitical. But never anything I thought was, like, dangerous. At some point, they told me about their relationship and were pretty open about it after that. It became very uncomfortable for me because while I don't think of myself as homophobic, seeing two dudes constantly make out, and something else that is redacted, blacked out, was a bit much, the informant writes. Also, since Lance's room was always super messy, they'd bang in Tyler's room. Another redacted description, and I didn't like hearing it, the informant wrote. Lance started becoming more and more erratic again until the end of December. He just had another nuclear meltdown after having another argument. Also, a couple months before, we noticed Lance had been growing breasts and said he'd been taking black market HRT, which I do not know what that entailed, but I think it was making him very erratic. So we basically shut down for like 2 weeks, not talking, just hitting his vapes in the living room in the dark. This narrative continues for quite some time before the informant begins to demonstrate Lance Twiggs' complete mental breakdown, including pictures of this so-called nest, wires and trinkets that were put together by Lance Twiggs. I'm going to read this. Going to read this part. Also, apparently Lance had gone upstairs, this was during one of the magic nights, and gone into full tantrum mode and was thrashing around on the floor while Tyler tried to calm him down, which funnily enough would make that the third time someone at magic night went full tantrum and thrashed around on the ground, because one of Lance's friends would crash out a lot. After that, Lance went effing mental. He'd be super wide-eyed with either a loopy grin or a rictus grin like the effing Joker, depending on his mood. The nest came back full force, and Lance started living downstairs full-time again. This is a picture of the cleaned-up version, he said. Imagine this type of mess, but denser and all over the entire living room and kitchen counters. He started playing on his DS and drawing shit in, I think, PictoChat and scribbling it all out while giggling with the effing wide-eyed Joker smile. He'd either be doing this or his experiments or talking with ChatGPT day in and day out. He, hardly ever slept. The experiments got scarier, too, like jugs of water with whisks full of aluminum foil that had 2 copper wires coming out of them. He started leaving little papers around the house that he'd scribbled on while doing that giggling shit. You can see these pictures, these demonic drawings that are included in this information from the informant. Clearly, this is not normal. Clearly, this is the work of someone who is deeply mentally unwell. This is, as you can see, a complete narration of the inside what it was like to be on the inside of Tyler Robinson and Lance Twiggs' apartment. Example after example. The drawings are endless. He goes on and on. He said, this stuff looks bad, but it's even worse when you saw his face when he was doodling this shit, combined with the giggling and how vigorously he'd scribble. It was very scary, and the way he spoke was weird. It was a bunch of words, but none of them made sense together, or sometimes it'd be in rhyme, or just sometimes he'd only smile and point. Bro, if I were religious, the informant writes, I would have called an exorcist. The smile was so effing scary. And he showed me what conversations he was having with ChatGPT. He told me he'd solved some equation backwards and showed me the ChatGPT text as proof. The chats were just paragraphs of random Greek and I think Roman symbols with numbers and random letters going on and on and on. He'd somehow gotten it to respond in kind as well. He told me to start scrolling faster, and so I did. And he kept telling me faster until he was basically screaming at me to scroll faster. And the effing ChatGPT chats just went on for like ever. I sat there scrolling at max speed for at least like a minute or two, and by the bottom of it, it was still weird symbols. And the informant goes on to say that Tyler told me that Lance had basically been up for like 3 days straight talking to ChatGPT. And yet, as you can see on the screen, and I apologize for the graphic nature of this photograph, it is, of course, a used condom sitting on the counter on the corner of a sink, a vanity, and a bathroom. Tyler Robinson was still engaging in sexual activity with Lance Twiggs during these periods of complete mental instability. And the informant says it was normal for Tyler Robinson to call Lance Twiggs, quote, my love. As you can see, the picture painted of Tyler Robinson and the context of his relationship with Lance Twiggs, the sexual grooming that was described by this informant, the extreme mental instability of Lance Twiggs that appears, at least according to the informant, to borderline on the demonic, the radicalized political views of both Lance Twiggs, but also Tyler Robinson as he became more involved, not just as a roommate, but as a lover of Lance Twiggs, becomes evident. You see how this young man who was raised by parents who are registered Republicans might have been radicalized into a murderer, an assassin. And that's not all. This is not all the information that we have to substantiate the reality that Tyler Robinson was a leftist, something that 75% of the American people do not know. We also have the groups in and around Salt Lake City. In Utah, the transgender groups, the group Armed Queers, Salt Lake City, for example, is a pseudo-militia style group. It is a group of transgender individuals who, as their name suggests, their mission is to arm themselves to defend, quote-unquote, transgender rights against the oppressors. They posted multiple times in the lead up to Charlie Kirk's assassination, only to scrub their entire online presence almost immediately following Charlie Kirk's death. They are now under investigation by the FBI over whether they had any foreknowledge of the assassination of Charlie Kirk, because Armed Queer Salt Lake City, there are other radical trans groups, firearms-related trans groups that espouse what appears to be neo-Marxist, Antifa-adjacent ideology, which, of course, has an undercurrent of violence, whether it is explicit or whether it is implicit. These other groups, the John Brown Gun Club and the Socialist Rifle Association, are all connected, as left-wing groups always are, whether it's through coordination or co-hosting or member overlap. They appear to be autonomous groups, but in reality, they are but one apparatus run by left-wingers who hate you and hate me and hated Charlie Kirk. As I said, Armed Queers is now under investigation by the FBI, but what's interesting is the Socialist Rifle Association, in the days after Charlie Kirk's assassination, told Luke Rosiak, a stellar investigative journalist who is now with the Daily Wire, they told Luke Rosiak that Tyler Robinson was not a member of their group. Luke Rosiak had asked because online in the days and weeks leading up to Charlie's assassination, there were something like a half dozen posts that were made on various social media outlets and forums that seemed to signal some kind of foreknowledge of Charlie Kirk's assassination. Something big was going to happen, and it was going to target Charlie Kirk, and it just seemed to be too many posts that signaled the same sort of potential violence against Charlie Kirk for it to be a coincidence. And when Luke Rosiak was looking into the individuals who made those posts and their associations with radical trans groups, he decided to ask the Socialist Rifle Association if Tyler Robinson was a member, and they denied that he was. They said he was not a member of their group. But then, strangely enough, when the Socialist Rifle Association was asked if Lance Twiggs was a member of that group, they declined to answer. They refused to answer. In fact, they cited their own member confidentiality policies. As you can see, a very big difference in how they handled the question about Tyler Robinson, an outright denial. They owed him no confidentiality because he was not a member of their group. They denied it. But when asked about Lance Twiggs, they said they could not answer whether he was a member or not because of the confidentiality policies that they apply to their members. These groups, Armed Queers, Salt Lake City, the Socialist Rifle Association, the John Brown Gun Club, they are, as I said, anarchist, radical leftist, pro-trans ideology, neo-Marxist style groups who are arming themselves and training people who share their ideology to defend themselves against so-called oppression, the classic Marxist dialectic. And they signaled foreknowledge, whether it turns out to be a coincidence or not, they signaled foreknowledge of the assassination of Charlie Kirk. As I said, at least one of these groups, if not more, are now under current FBI investigation over that very question. That brings us, of course, to Tyler Robinson and this contradiction in his background. He liked hunting and fishing and shooting. His parents were Republican, and yet he was engaged in a sexual relationship with a mentally unstable man who was pretending to be a woman. This has provided confusion because he's not necessarily your stereotypical leftist. Your stereotypical leftist doesn't necessarily know a lot about firearms, with, I guess, the exception of these radical leftist trans groups who specialize in firearms. Your average leftist isn't necessarily known as being good with hunting and fishing and camping and all the sort of manly endeavors that you might associate with right-wing young men. Tyler Robinson bragged to his coworker at one point about his long-range shooting skills, which, again, isn't something you necessarily stereotypically associate with someone on the left. And yet, the bullet casings that were found after the assassination of Charlie Kirk were engraved, as referenced by Tyler Robinson in his text messages to Lance Twiggs. They were engaged with transgender ideology, even furry ideology, the sort of subset sexual fetish of the transgender ideology, and Antifa slogans, such as, quote, notices bulges, OWO, what's this? Hey, fascist, catch. If you read this, you are gay. And oh, Bella Ciao, which is an Antifa anthem. There can be no question about the political ideology of Tyler Robinson. It's not a question of whether he was a leftist. It's a question of whether we are going to allow the preconceived villains, the bias of the mainstream media and Hollywood and leftist commentators, and yes, prominent right-wing voices like Candace Owens, stand in the way of the truth. If 75% of the American people are unaware of this, we need to change that. If we are committed to pursuing justice for Charlie Kirk, if we are committed to doing what's right for him, for his family, for our country, then we have to break through the monopoly of fake news. Whether that fake news comes from the left or whether that fake news comes from the right. It is critically important. It's not just, Tyler Robinson was on their side, not our side. He's a bad guy, not a good guy. It's not a tit for tat. It's critically important that we understand and identify his ideology, because that was the motivation for this murder that was committed. You watched the video of Charlie Kirk being assassinated. You saw him die. The transgender ideology, the leftist ideology that not only tolerates and supports, but promotes and encourages violence. It's embedded in our society. This was not a young man who was operating independent of the influences of modern life. He was chronically online. He was impacted by the COVID lockdowns. He was groomed sexually into what appears to be a toxic relationship with a transgender identifying man who was mentally unstable and used drugs and alcohol. He ascribed verbally, he admitted to believing the leftist ideology that falsely accused Charlie Kirk, who had the audacity to say there is man and woman, as hateful and so hateful that it can't be negotiated out. That it justifies murder. And if we don't identify that, if we refuse to acknowledge this as a real, ongoing, existing, deeply penetrated threat in our society, it's going to happen again. The day after Charlie Kirk was assassinated, if someone had told you that 3 months later, only 24% of the American people would be interested in the reality of the motivation, the motivating political ideology of Charlie Kirk's assassin, you wouldn't believe that. You would say, there's no way. You were shocked and grieving and righteously ready to do battle for justice for Charlie. Well, battles come in different forms, and that moment is now. That moment where you are called to stand up and use your voice to be a warrior and a defender, a protector of truth, because truth matters, is now. If we want to end the political violence that is festering in our country, that has erupted in our country, that is organized and funded by the leftist opposition in this country, we have to start by acknowledging it when it exists. Otherwise, it will continue to rear its ugly head. The last time against Charlie, the next time against who knows? You or me? We're going to change that number, that 24%. The next time this poll is run, the American people's eyes will have been opened. They will know differently. It doesn't matter who they listen to, who their favorite commentator is, what outstanding questions they may have or we all may have about the murder of Charlie Kirk and how this could have happened and who knew about it and who was behind it. It's okay to have questions. But if we truly seek justice for Charlie, you will do your part to change the misperception of the American people. The fake news that they believe that Tyler Robinson was right-wing, that he was apolitical, that they don't know his political ideology. You will do your part to share the truth. Please send this episode not just to your leftist friends, not to your centrist friends. Send it to your most conservative family and friends. We are a couple of weeks from Christmas at this point, and we are so grateful to be partnered here at the Liz Wheeler Show with Preborn, a ministry that saves lives. We're so grateful for you taking part in this ministry and being generous with your time and your talent and your treasure. As we celebrate the gift of life this Christmas, you have the opportunity to share that same gift with a mother and her baby. Imagine a young woman feeling alone, facing an unplanned pregnancy, unsure of what to do, facing coercion. She's searching for hope, and that's where Preborn Ministries comes in. You recognize these names: Steve Jobs, Andrea Bocelli, Steph Curry, Jack Nicholson, Celine Dion, Oprah. What do they all have in common? They were all unplanned pregnancies. And so many others. Maybe you were unplanned. I have no doubt that you know someone, you love someone who was unplanned. God's plan of redemption often works in the unplanned. And when a mother is struggling to make a life-altering decision, Preborn Network of Clinics is there for her. Every mother that Preborn serves faces a moment of decision where she sees her baby's ultrasound, and in that sacred moment, she has the opportunity to say yes. Did you know when a mother sees her unborn child on that ultrasound screen, no matter how tiny that life is, she is more than likely to choose life for that child? For this Christmas, for just $28, you can help save a life. That's how much it costs for one ultrasound. $28. And you've changed the course of not just one person's life, but two. And thanks to a special matching grant, your gift this year is doubled. To donate, please dial pound 250 and say the keyword baby. And know when you speak that word, it's not just a word, it's a person whose life you're saving. That's pound 250, keyword baby, or go to preborn.com/Liz. That's preborn.com/Liz. You know, there have been a lot of people since Charlie Kirk was murdered who have tried to put words in his mouth. They've tried to claim that he shared their position on particular issues by claiming they had private talks with him or that they knew more about him than other people. And what's funny about that is that Charlie Kirk is on record, on camera, in public. His views on almost every topic under the sun are documented. There's no need for speculation. There's no need to claim that Charlie Kirk held some secret position that contradicted his publicly held position on a particular topic. There's no need to try to rewrite Charlie's legacy and his character when we have all the evidence in front of us that we need to know exactly what Charlie Kirk thought of on almost any given issue, including what Charlie Kirk felt about Candace Owens and about Nicholas Fuentes and about preconceived villains and preconceived bias against Israel specifically. Shortly before Charlie Kirk was assassinated, he was speaking to young people and he was asked about this very topic that we're talking about today. And this is what Charlie said in his own words. Take a look.
Thank you for coming, Charlie. And I had a quick question about anti-Semitism online. Another question here they asked about Candace Owens. And, you know, I'm a big fan of you. I was a big fan of her. But she's obviously been going down this anti-Semitic bent. And through her, I'm kind of finding out about these other characters online, like Nick Fuentes. I'm sure you've heard of him. And these people, they've been active for a long time. And it seems like they've just been ignored, which is working. But now they're kind of surging in popularity. And as someone who I enjoy watching your debates, Are they people you'd be willing to engage with and maybe shut them down in a way through a debate or something like that?
Well, I mean, I'm not going to debate Candace. But no, look, I'll debate anybody that shows up at our campus events first and foremost. But I do want to take what you say and extrapolate it. That there is a corner of the internet of people that want to point and blame the Jews for all their problems. Everybody, this is demonic and it's from the pit of hell. And it should not be tolerated, period. But it goes to a deeper, more structural problem of an entire generation that has economic resentment. They don't own anything. They're not getting married. They're not having children. They're depressed. They're anxious. They're staring at their screens all day long. And if all of a sudden your extrapolation of all that is, well, it's the Jews' fault, that is sloppy and shallow thinking. And not only that, they say, oh, it's the Jews' fault. Okay, let's kind of play this out. Well, tuberculosis, that used to kill about 1 billion people. You know, it's a group of Jewish scientists that came up with the antibiotic that cured tuberculosis. How about CPR, the MRI machine? You know, there's over 500 million lives that were saved over the last 50 years because of people that were Jewish scientists that were working on things. They'll never say thank you to the Jews, but they'll always say shame on the Jews. It's weird how that works. And finally, they always blame the Jews for stuff. Jewish people are an ethnicity. So therefore, definitionally, you have people that are secular, orthodox, religious, that are all over the spectrum. You're trying to blame an entire ethnicity for a singular problem. Hold on, let's take a step back here. Instead of that, what could you possibly do in your own personal life to improve your own state of being? If you are blaming 0.02% of the world's population for all of your problems, that is not going to be good for your soul. It's not good for your psychology. It's not good for your future in any way, shape, or form. And so I would just say this, that any young person that goes into this hyper online brain rot, you are serving yourself over to your own demise. You are serving yourself into a suicide mission that will not make you happier and not make you healthier. Instead, here's what your attitude should be. Your attitude should be like, I can't own stuff. I got it. Can't own a home. That not getting married. I don't know who to date. And said, wow, the challenges are immense. I'm going to now overcome all those challenges and go on an adventure. I'm going to prove everyone wrong. I'm now not going to be a victim. I'm going to be a victor. I'm going to dig deep. This is still a great country. This is a free country. I'm going to use my agency. I'm going to use my ability. And I'm not just going to go point in the corner and be like, I'm overweight because of the Jews. Women don't want to date me because of the Jews. How about this? As Jordan Peterson would say, sit up straight with your shoulders back, follow the rules for life, make yourself interesting, learn something new every single day, and instead of pointing at a small group of people and engaging in this brain rot, become a better person. You'll be a happier and healthier, more joyful and productive person because of it.
Right on.
Man, I miss him. Share this episode as far and wide as you can. And thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. I'm Liz Wheeler. This is The Liz Wheeler Show.